The other thing I often see is we're getting where seniors will get calls from people identifying themselves as their grandchildren who are in trouble. They either need bond money, for example, or their purse has been stolen and they're in Canada or something.
Oh, help me, Grandma, or help me, Grandpa.
Right. And sometimes they'll even use the senior's name. Now, where do they get this information?
Right.
They get it from obituaries. They'll read the obituary of maybe a widow's husband who passed away, and it will list all of the relatives, including grandchildren by name, and and oftentimes the voice won't quite be the same, but the senior gets hooked in because they feel if they don't act immediately, something bad will happen to their grandchild, obviously whom they love, and there's a request to use Western Union to wire this money, usually out of the country. Canada is very common. We see a lot of that.
What's a senior to do? They get a phone call, and it's one of these, they suspect it's one of these grandparent scam calls, and they're on the phone. Do they keep them on the phone and try to get information from the, how can they put recourse back on them so that legal entities like the police or whatever can, the Better Business Bureau, can go after them? What do we do? To fight back, I guess I want to say. What do we do to fight back when we feel like we're getting those types of calls?
One of the things I would recommend is if they can get some information, and they're going to find that the caller is going to get more and more frustrated because this person is not going down an avenue they want them to.
Start asking questions.
Right, yep, and then the call, of course, should be terminated many times by the caller who realizes that this person's not going to allow themselves to be victimized. But then the victim should then call the police department and report it just so that the authorities are aware that this is happening. And
so simply dial 911, Dan?
Well, I don't know that that would be an emergency, but maybe during business hours, just telephone the local police department or the sheriff's department just to report this, because they may actually be tracking. If they're getting numerous reports, what can often happen is then a press release can be.
And we've seen that happen.
Sure.
They'll come on television and say, beware, this is going on.
And alert the rest of the community that the community members are being targeted by this kind of scam with these kinds of details. And the viewers should also maybe watch Senior Perspectives, the wonderful newspaper published by out at Tanglewood.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, because we often will have trainings. We have two coming up. One particularly more geared toward estate planning and those other kind of things, and that's a Friday in April, and I can't recall quite the date, but we're also looking at another date in Oceana County at the Area Agency on Aging and Heart, where we're going to present a workshop or training for seniors at their senior center on some of these scams and how to avoid them.
You know, you just have to be so aware, you know. And we talked a lot about scams and fraud and exploitation today, but there's lots of other types of abuse too. And we have to really be mindful of protecting our older adults from all types, physical and emotional. And that's why we have Adult Protective Services. And if some of our viewers have just joined us, my guest has been Dan Bonner from Legal Aid of West Michigan. We've been focusing on the whole issue of vulnerable adult abuse. And call Adult Protective Services if you suspect it, or simply dial 211. They'll point you in the right direction. Dan, thank you so much for being my guest today.
My pleasure, Maggie. Thank you for having me.